Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Sanderson Farms Championship. Going to break down what to expect from the golf course, Country Club of Jackson, as well as how I'm approaching the DFS and betting side of things to go after some of my top plays. We'll talk about some of the key stats, my modeling, what I'm looking for in some of those top options, as well as a few of the players that I'll be getting over the field on, both in my DFS lineups and for a few bets. So we've got some outrights, a few top 10s that I'm mixing in, a lot to talk about, so it's not wasting any time at all here, and started off with, first off, a look at Country Club at Jackson and what I'm looking for in players this week. If the weather holds up this week, we're likely going to see a little bit of a birdie fest out there for the Sanderson Farms, which is going to really craft what we're looking for in players. We've got our approach metrics. We'll talk about some of the buckets here in a second, but a lot of it comes down to just pure good old scoring. So we'll talk about the putting stats. It's there at number 2. Birdie or better percentage, par 5 scoring down there at number 5. This is the kind of event where you've got to get it to an 18 to maybe even 23, 24 under par to go out there and win. And for those top 10s, probably at least like 16 to 18 under. So the number one thing I think you should be considering with your players is their raw firepower. There are only certain guys that are capable of getting to that kind of score. And if they're more of a conservative, bogey avoidance sort of player, I don't know if I love them for this kind of event. So we'll start off with the approach buckets, where it's a pretty balanced approach profile. It's a relatively long golf course for the swing season, only about 7,400 yards. So for a par 72, it's not like a long, lengthy course over the entire schedule, but these fall series events tend to be shorter, plotter kind of golf courses, and that's not really what we get here. You've got guys like Luke List that have won here, a few other bombers that finished in the top 5 over the last few seasons, and you've seen a little bit of a power bias up there on the leaderboards. So with your approach profile, while you will have some of the shorter clubs in hand, you're also going to have some medium to long irons as well. So what you'll see over here, if you guys are on the Patreon page, is that my weighting is pretty balanced across the board. So not really one specific proximity bucket that we're honing in on, but in general, approach play is always important heading into an event. Maybe a little bit less so at this one, just because we've had a break since the last time that we have a lot of shots gained metrics, and really the Pro Core is the only sample size over the last month or so. Your putting stats, you can look at some Bermuda grass putting. The surfaces out there are a champion Bermuda grass, and also recent form, just as I said before, not that important on a week like this, but if you're going to look at anything, look at the last 24 or last 12 measured rounds. Off the tee, a little bit more of a power over an accuracy course, and then birdie or better percentage and par 5 scoring is really where we're going to get that birdie or better upside, right? The players that have the firepower, the capability to go out there and post something 15 to 20 plus under par. Par 5 scoring is where you see a lot of the birdies at this golf course. You're going to have 4 opportunities on every single round, and those power players are also going to see an advantage there as well. In terms of comps, I've got the Mexico Open and also the Corrales Putacana. Very open courses, longer courses out there in the PGA Tour as well. So in terms of the approach profile, also the off the tee emphasis, you get a lot of similarities there, and then also, pretty low scoring at both of those events as well. So in general, I think you're more so just looking for guys that have that firepower. If they're long off the tee, that's a boost. If they're a really good Bermuda grass putter, those would just be the cherries on top there. So the first player that we're going to go through is Nick Dunlap here at $9,700. He's our first core play, somebody that I did bet at plus 2750. It was a 10% profit boost from his plus 2500 number. And if there's a golf course that you could make for Nick Dunlap, it's one that is relatively wide open off the tee. He could be a little bit wild in that department. One where the putting on Bermuda matters. He's one of the best Bermuda grass putters that we have in this field. And a course where you've got to take it super low. It's pretty much got everything that we want for Nick Dunlap here. So not a surprise that he was my first click this week. He was easily the first outright that I wanted to get to. And compared to the other outrights that we took, I put twice as much units out here on Nick Dunlap. So he's my most confident pick this week. He's probably going to be my highest exposed play out there in DFS. And a lot of it just comes down to the sort of player that he is. He's shown us that he's already capable of winning. In fact, twice out there during his rookie season. He got into contention a few times on top of that as well. And you've got players that are more expensive than Nick Dunlap that haven't won before on the PGA Tour, that haven't shown up in over a season out there on top 5, top 3 finish. And meanwhile, you've got Dunlap down here, who's great on Bermuda, fits this golf course to a T, and that has won twice over that stretch. So I think if you're just going to go a single bullet for an outright, I know who I'd be picking out there in my exposure. But in DFS, he's going to carry some ownership. I can't imagine that he'll be under 20% owned, just because I think he's such a slam dunk play at this event. Really, the only thing that you could hold against him would be that recent form. And you're going to see that, in fact, with all 6 plays that we talk about here. And just as I mentioned over here on the custom model tab, you don't want to bog yourself down on those recent form metrics. The only event that has been even remotely recent would be the PGA Championship. And because the field is so weak here, hardly any of the players were even in the playoffs, right? And if they were in the playoffs, it was out there for like maybe the first event. So if you're looking at these shots gained metrics, if you're using this recent form over here, which is where I think a lot of the chalk is going to come in, like a JJ Spawn gaining over 2 strokes per round, a Fishburne, after that great performance at the Pro Tour, #1 in recent form ranking, I honestly couldn't give 2 shits about how they played at that event. A lot of these shots gained metrics are going to throw you off. They're going to make you think that these players are playing a lot better than they are in reality. And if that's going to keep Nick Dunlap at maybe average, maybe just above average when it comes to the ownership, then by all means, right, give me who I think is the best player in this field at a sub $10,000 mark over there in DFS and at 25-1 to go out there and win. If you can get that plus 2750, if you have a little bit of a profit boost or a better number on the book that you have access to, obviously try and get the best number that you can. But really, no matter which metric that we're looking at, he checks the boxes. Whether it's birdie or better percentage, he's a top 3 player in this field. Par 5 scoring, he's a top 5 player in this field. He's long off the tee. He's got that Bermuda grass putting that we're looking for. So in my model, he was #1 if I looked at a long-term model. So if I spread it out to like the last 64 rounds, he was the #1 player in the field, which for a rookie, a young cat like Nick Dunlap, is mighty fine impressive. The next player we're going to talk up here is going to be Eric Cole at $9,200. So what you can see with these core plays is that I skipped the entire top end of the board, and I'm going a little bit more balanced with some of my spend up options. And Eric Cole, though he's not an elite off the tee player like what you have with Nick Dunlap, he's a great putter on Bermuda grass. He's a top 5 player in birdie or better percentage heading into this event, and that's over the last 36 rounds. So, giving it a little bit of a larger sample size so that we can look at what happened before the FedEx Cup playoffs. And Eric Cole at this kind of price tag, this kind of golf course, this is where he could go out there and get that one tour win. And really, the kind of player that you can comp him to would be a Mackenzie Hughes. Mackenzie Hughes won this a few years ago out there, I believe at like 18 under par, 19 under par. Eric Cole's not the best off the tee player like you have with Mackenzie Hughes, but he's fantastic on Bermuda grass. He's a really good iron player, and the one huge weakness for Eric Cole is that he's short and relatively inaccurate off the tee. It's the same thing with Mackenzie Hughes, right? He has a hard time hitting fairways. He's not the longest player in the PGA Tour, has gone a little bit longer over the last year or so. Same thing with Eric Cole, by the way, right? He's added some distance over the last year, just can't hit a fairway for his life. Luckily for him, the fairway percentage is sub 60% at this golf course, and pretty much everyone's going to have a hard time hitting the fairway. And with a low missed fairway penalty, this is the kind of golf course where if he has that spike iron and putting week, against a weak field like this, it could turn into a win. So I took him at plus 3,300. That was boosted from plus 3,000. In DFS, also because he's losing strokes to the field heading in, I don't think he's going to be massively popular. I could see Dunlap being over that 20% projected ownership. Eric Cole, because of the form, I can't see at that same kind of number. I think a lot of your casuals, your fish that are looking at the recent form metrics are going to play guys like Patrick Fishburne. Ben Griffin nearly won this event last year, so I think he's going to get some steam himself. And then even guys like a Patrick Rogers, because he's gaining strokes over his last 12 measured rounds, I think is going to be a little bit more popular than Eric Cole. So for me, again, that form I think is just very misleading on a week like this. The fall swing in general is really not a time to be looking at a lot of recent form metrics. And if you're looking at the long-term stuff, one of the best birdie makers in the field at a golf course, just like, went out there and helped Mackenzie Hughes get that win, I think it could be that for Eric Cole. So that's why I took the shot out there in the outright. And I think a DFS could be a relatively low-owned play to get over the field on. The last core play we're going to go with before we get into some values a lot further down the board is going to be Steven Jaeger, who I took for a bet at 3,300 as well. So same number, boosted from plus 3,000, and the form is not great, right? He's losing 1.2 strokes per round over his last 12 rounds. rounds. But what you got to remember about Steven Jaeger is that he actually played in the playoff events. He actually played against some of the best fields in golf. And sure, he lost strokes to an elite tier field, but he's not playing poor golf compared to these other players, right? He at least made it to the playoffs. He at least had a season back there in 2023, 2024. And at this kind of price tag, if people are just going to write him off because he had a quote unquote poor, and I'll put that in quotes, poor playoff performance, then give me all the Steven Jaeger. This is his kind of golf course. He's not the most accurate player off the tee, but can hit it a country mile. That's kind of what we're looking for in our players off the tee. If they're long off the tee, that's great. You don't have to have it, as you could tell with Eric Cole, right? Not every player is going to be a bomber out here in this preview, but Steven Jaeger also a lot better on Bermuda grass than what he is on any other surface on tour. So over here on the right side, let me actually scroll over so you can see it fully there. We've got the shots gained putting on Bermuda grass, but also the shots gained putting differential, which compares that metric to his last 24 measured rounds. And what you'll see with Steven Jaeger is that he's over half a stroke better on Bermuda grass than what you've seen from him lately. So, obviously that would make a case for some putting regression for Steven Jaeger. He's much more comfortable on the Bermuda grass surface. And if he gets back to the kind of ball striking that we know him for, he's gaining strokes out there on these Bermuda grass greens, he could win this kind of event, let alone go out there top 5, top 10 and be optimal for DFS. So just like the other two plays, I think he's going to be a lot lower owned than he should be because of that quote-unquote recent form, but that form isn't even all that recent. So hopefully he's been working on his game over the break. I think a lot of these kind of players, you kind of got to reset them to their long-term baseline. I think that's the best way to handle this kind of week is if you go back, you just say, you know what, I'm going to forgive and forget what's happened for the last month or so. Let's look at the last 36 or last maybe even 64 rounds, something like that. I don't know. Some larger sample size is probably the best way to go about it. I use the last 36 rounds. If you want to go even further than that, last 48, last 64, whatever you guys want to go out there and do, I think that there's a good argument to be made for doing so. So Steven Jaeger, if you're using that kind of process, is going to be maybe the top player in the field, right? He's playing better. Then maybe Keith Mitchell would be the number one player. Then maybe you'd have Steven Jaeger down there at number 2. That's the idea on getting to him for an outright in DFS. Before we talk about our value plays, do want to mention how you can get access to these spreadsheets yourself. So obviously a lot of this is blacked out on there. You've got my projections, modeling player pool for every single player for this spreadsheet without anything blacked out. Make sure to check out the Patreon page. There's a link in the description of the video. It is $15 a month to join the Golf DFS tier. And on there, you'll get all my access, all these spreadsheets out there for the main slate and for Showdown for rounds 2 through 4. So we're going to be doing Showdown this week. I'm going to have Showdown streams going as well over there with the Ship It Nation sponsorship. So make sure to stop on by for those. But for all the content, for all the spreadsheets that I'm putting out there to help streamline the process, give you guys some perspective to what I'm doing week to week, give you an idea of what a pro DFS player is doing with their exposure, make sure to go ahead and check it out. You've got your projections, you've got all the shots gained metrics, recent form, event history, the weighting over here on the right side of the custom model is all going to be yours if you join the Patreon page. So make sure to check it out if you guys haven't already. Link in the description, as I said before, and the place to be if you guys want all my content for golf. Next up, we've got our value plays, and towards the bottom end of the board, these are all going to be top 10 bets. So the odds on Hard Rock Bet, it's the only book that I have legally down here in Florida, was just not great. Even for some of these top end players, you can get plus 3,500 on Eric Cole at places. I believe plus 3,500, maybe even better out there in Steven Jaeger on a few books as well. So obviously, do your own line shopping, do what you guys can. But down here in Florida, we're stuck with a monopoly right now. So what I ended up going with for some of these longer shots was a top 10 bet. But if I had comparable or at least competitive outright odds, I consider betting these for outrights as well. So let's go off with our first pick here, which is going to be Chris Gotterup at $7,300. I took him for a top 10 at plus 715. So that was boosted out there from plus 650, a little 10% profit boost. And what I like with Chris Gotterup is the fact that he's long off the tee. He's a good Bermuda grass putter. You can see, in fact, gains over 0.6 strokes per round out there on Bermuda grass greens. He's a good par 5 scorer. He's top 10 in the field in birdie or better percentage over his last 36 rounds. So just like a Nick Dunlap, he checks all of those main boxes that we're looking for. Power player, decent iron play, really good putting on the surface of the week. So why not take a shot on him at 7,300? He's shown us some winning upside already out there in the PGA Tour. He's a wide range of outcome sort of player. He's not shy to go out there and miss a few cuts, but when he has his best stuff, he oftentimes finishes in that top 15, top 10, which is what we're looking for in DFS, a large field GPP kind of format, like a lot of us are playing over there on Draftkings, is we want somebody that can break the slate at $7,300. And I think he has that kind of upside. He's a really good course fit, compared to some of the other players that have had success around Country Club of Jackson. And that's why I'm getting a lot of exposure to Goddard. And what you'll see, the shots gained metrics, right? There's a reason why we're not really looking at these, is they don't mean all that much when you've had such a long break. But what you usually see with Chris Goddard is that he's a gainer off the tee. He's an okay iron player, and then pretty average with the short game. So he's very much so a ball striking heavy player, very streaky out there with the irons. We're going to need a good iron week, but after a little bit of a break, a few weeks to go out there and reset, figure out his swing, I think there's a good chance that he could find that. And if he does, he's a diamond in the rough at 7,300. Next up, we got Michael Thorbjornsen, $100 cheaper at $7,200. I took him for a top 10 at plus 825 for this week. And what I like about Thorbjornsen is a lot of the same with Chris Goddard. He's long off the tee, maybe the longest player that we have in this field. He's been really good on Bermuda. In fact, he gains 0.15 strokes per round out there on Bermuda grass. He's also a player that is a very high birdie or better percentage player. So just like Chris Goddard, right, super long off the tee, right, was top 10 in birdie or better percentage. So you're telling me here, he's just been making too many mistakes, and he's new to the PGA Tour, young, inexperienced sort of player. But what we've seen with Thorbjornsen, second place finish at the John Deere, has shown us a lot of upside out there with his kind of skill set. But he's also shown us that if he can clean up the mistakes, he's got the firepower to win one of these kind of events. He's not the kind of guy who's shy to go out there and take aim at pins. If he can avoid the double bogey, some of the out of bounds balls, the water balls that we've seen from him to start his career here, not only is he going to start to finish top 10, I could see this guy winning events here in 2024. So especially maybe 2025, maybe larger sample size, we'll go ahead and give that to him. But if he were to win one of these fall series events, I wouldn't be that surprised either. So if we look at the shots gained metrics, again, it's not really going to tell us that much, but you can see he's at least gaining on approach. He's been okay with the short game, and very surprisingly, and I'll say very, very surprisingly, losing off the tee, because he is maybe the longest player that we have out there on the PGA Tour. So at a golf course where you don't have to worry as much about your driving accuracy, that is going to be massive for Michael Thorbjornsen. And really the reason why he's had a lot of those blow-up holes has been mistakes off the tee, has been hitting it OB, hitting it into water, as I said before. And this week, he's not going to have to worry about that nearly as much. So large field GPPs, he's got an extremely wide range of outcomes. We've seen him finish second. We've also seen him miss quite a few cuts. So if you're going to play him, just know that he has a relatively low floor, could easily go out there and miss the weekend. But if he has his best stuff, could also go out there and win this golf tournament. So I like the top 10 at plus 825. If you can find an outright number that is competitive, I honestly wouldn't hate that either. Then the last play we're going to talk about here is Pearson Coody at $7,000. The form isn't great either, right? Just the same thing with all these plays here, but is a gainer on Bermuda grass. And what you like about Pearson is that he's a fantastic par 5 scorer, also top 15 birdie or better percentage player in this field, and super long off the tee. So I know it's starting to sound very repetitive, but that's what I'm looking for in players, right? And those are the kind of plays I'm going to give you, right? If that's what I'm looking for. And he's got that same kind of skill set, young, up-and-coming power player that's going out there and making a bunch of birdies. This is the kind of golf course where, and also, he's a little bit inaccurate off the tee. He gets into a lot of trouble when it comes to his shots gained off the tee. Not going to have to worry about that nearly as much at this sort of golf tournament. So I love that for Pearson. Just go out there, clean it up a little bit with the bogey avoidance, and I think he could be in for a relatively big week here. So worth noting that with these value plays, I don't think they're going to carry much ownership at all. I would say that Goddard's going to be for sure probably under 10%. I could see Thorbjornsen being under 7% owned, and then Pearson Coody down here probably at most about 7% ownership himself. A lot of that because of the form. You're going to have guys around him like a Valimaki Crow that people would rather play, and long term, Coody's the better player. He's had a lot better results than most of those guys around him. Michael Thorbjornsen, I know he hasn't been around on the tour all that often, but he's probably one of the higher pedigree players in this field. A lot of people think that he's going to have a very bright future. Chris Goddard has already shown us winning upside, already shown us top 5s out here this season. You're comparing them to guys like Pan Kazire, who I know had that really good Procore championship, but it's a 1-week sample size, right? Goddard's a much better player long term. So that's my strategy for this week. I'm not letting those quote unquote recent form metrics cloud my process too much. and more so just trying to play based on that long-term skill set. That is all I've got for this week's DFS and betting preview. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. And there's going to be no restrictions on that because there's no massive favorites for this event. So go ahead, claim your player down below, because once a player is taken once, they cannot be taken again. And if you do end up getting the winner for this week, you will win a free month of my Patreon page. So go ahead, enter that to go ahead and earn that free month. Also, best of luck with all of your exposure this week. Subscribe to the channel if you guys don't want to miss any of the content to come, including our weekly live stream, which will be Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're also going to have live streams for rounds 2 through 4 of Showdown this week. So all the usual golf content that you guys are looking for. And just an FYI, out here for these fall swing, it's going to be Tuesday out there for the DFS previews. I know during the regular season, it's been coming out on Mondays, but because of Monday Night Football, my obligations over there on the NFL side, it's going to be Tuesdays for these previews. So just know that for the rest of the fall schedule here. But I appreciate all your support here on the channel, guys. Best of luck out there with all of your exposure this week. Let's go out there, take down a GPP or two. Let's try and go out there cashing outright as well, and have some fun out here with the Sanderson Farms.